Hey folks, Dr. Mike Israetel here with a really important message. You're slacking off. Wait, no, I said that wrong. How do you tell if you're slacking off in the gym, especially with hypertrophy training for muscle growth, and how can you fix it? What do we mean by going hard enough? In this specific video, in this case, we mean you're not sure if you are leaving reps in the tank. You're not sure if you are going close enough to failure. Sometimes you get to failure and you say, oh, I failed, I can't move anymore, but you're not sure if you're lying to yourself. We all have a little bit of doubt. But if you have a lot of doubt, and if you've seen some other videos that said, hey, you really need to train harder, and you're really second-guessing yourself, you might be interested in shit testing yourself. You might be interested in saying, okay, I want to find a way to really see if I'm pushing it as far as I can, or to really see that, well, okay, I was really slacking and I can do better. Because you don't want to go through months and even longer of mediocre gains you could have been better, and realize after all that the only reason you weren't gaining is you weren't pushing hard enough. Like, you're serious about this. You're really dedicated. That's why you're watching this video. But it's also a big mindfuck to always be doubting yourself and being, man, I'm not pushing hard enough, and actually realize you were pushing hard enough the entire time. And maybe you could have backed off a little bit in various other ways and gotten even better results. It's good to know where you stand objectively on pushing hard enough, and we do have a test for it. It's not the perfect test, but it's a damn good one, and you can try it yourself soon. I'll explain it in a bit how it works, to see, are you really pushing it really hard, or is there more left to push? So here we go. Here's the test. You do your normal mesocycle of training. You do your last pre-deload week as programmed, 0 RIR or to failure, whatever it is. Write down all of your sets and reps and numbers. Normal. This week should be very hard, and hopefully for you it already is, right? It should be very near failure or at failure and with super high fatigue. Here's the test. It's a tough test. Instead of taking a deload, you add one more week to your normal training program. So normally you do 5 weeks and then a deload. This time, after 5 weeks, you do week 6. And you go in and you try to replicate the performance you did in the last week. So you don't add any more sets. Same number of sets as week 5, or the last week you did. Same number of sets, except you choose for every single set, you either do the same number of reps, but add like 2.5 pounds, just barely. Add 2.5 or 5 pounds to the lift. 2.5 if it's like an isolation lift, and if it's a compound like leg press, you can add 5. Or you do the same exact weight, but you do one more rep than last time. So last time you did your first set of squats was a set of 12. This time, same weight, set of 13. Only one of those, not both. Okay? Either add a rep or 2.5 to 5 pounds to every single set that you did last week, this week, same number of sets. We're just going the smallest edge of further beyond that we can. And what you're trying to do is to see if you can perform just a little bit better than last week. That's the entire test. Here's what's going to happen. You are going to do one of 3 things generally, and it's going to be per set and per exercise and per muscle group. So there could be some differences. You are going to underperform. So last time you got a set of 12 with 400 pounds in the squat. This time you did a set of 10 and you were like, that physically couldn't get up. That was it, right? And the big thing is, during this testing week, you got to try really fucking hard. You have to put your ego on the line to say, it means a lot for me to beat this last week's set by 1 rep, or to get the same number of reps and do a little bit more weight, 5 more pounds, 2.5 more pounds. Invest a lot of your psychic energy into making that happen. You're trying to win. And if in this week you underperform, you can't win, that's option A. Option B is you tie the performance exactly. You had 400 pounds, you did 12 reps with it, you tried to do 13, but you just did 12 again, okay? Or option C is you beat last week's numbers. 405 for 12 last week, this time 405 for 13 or even 14. But just do one, it's good enough. Just one above 13 and you're done. If it's really easy, do 14th. Then you have other problems. Or it's 405 last week for 12. This time it's for 12, but 410. And you successfully did it. That means you beat last week's numbers. It's, of course, going to be different for various muscles groups and so on and so forth, because you could be slacking on biceps, but really going hard on shoulders. It'll tell you everything you need to know about every particular muscle group. And then you analyze. So if you passed the test, what does passing mean? Passing means one of two things. You either underperform, ironically, in that last week, or you just barely managed to tie. Because here's what this means. If in the week before, in which you said you were going fucking as hard as you could, basically, you hit 400 for or 405 for a set of 12 in the squat, let's say. And then this week, you hit 405 for a set of 10. We're saying you said you went close to failure last time, and the accumulated fatigue was really high. If both of those were true, the accumulated fatigue plus the fact that you were already super close to failure means it's very unlikely you're going to hit a PR, even manage to tie it. You're going to be weaker because of that accumulated fatigue if it's true that you were pushing hard enough. And you show up, you do 405, and you hit a set of 8 instead of 12, and you're like, oh, fuck that. It's way too, it's insane. And I mean, you really tried. And the set of 8 was you had spotters, and you came up, and number 9 didn't happen. That's it. You tried as hard as you could. And remember, if you're not trying in this week, there's no way to find out if you're really trying hard. So you have to tell yourself, this week, I'm trying as hard as possible. And you try to beat your last week's numbers. And if you can't do it, that means, yeah, you really were going hard last week. And you don't have to worry about a thing. You passed. You were training hard enough. Another way of passing is if you tied the lifts. Yeah, sure, the cumulative fatigue was really high, and you were very close to failure last time, but this week, I mean, you really just dug your brain into it, and you're like, fuck that. I'm going to fucking get 12 reps at least with 405. And you do. You just managed to tie it. We'll call on that you train hard. You train hard enough. Because with all of your focus, you just barely were able to tie and not exceed. Well, gee, you really were really close to the edge last time, certainly close enough that regularly getting that close to your mesocycles in the last week is hard enough to get all the best results. Going much harder than that is just a lot of extra fatigue and not a lot of extra anything else, right? However, let me see if this is, yeah, so this is just if you passed, okay? And if you passed, which means you either underperformed in this week, you weren't able to match your last week, or you got the same performance, just barely, then you don't need to train any harder in all likelihood. You can answer in the affirmative that I am training hard enough, and I wouldn't try this test for another months or years after. As long as you still feel like you're connected to training hard and you're not doubting yourself, there's no reason to ever repeat this test unless you really get curious again. I really think I've been slacking off. Then you repeat the test. Otherwise, don't repeat, okay? Because it's really ultra super fatiguing. You have to take a nice solid deload after, and it actually risks injury just a little bit more than normal training. So it's not something we want to do all the time. And the way it doesn't risk injury is if you were correct in guessing that you were training easy. If you were, in fact, training ultra hard, and you pass this test, you're risking injury considerably more because then you are as fatigued as you said, right? There's no reason to test this again because you found out, hey, actually I was training hard. Okay, great. What happens if you fail this test? What does that look like? If those lifts that you had when you had an XYZ performance in the last week, and then you did that extra test week and your performance improved, this means that how hard this last week was, plus the fatigue it generated, still wasn't enough of a disruption to get you to underperform. You recovered from last week and ascended even further, which means that last week could not have been that hard. Maybe it was ultra hard, but like you just didn't accumulate enough volume, which means maybe you are going ultra close to failure. And you tell yourself, look, I went to failure. I tried as hard. How come I can get stronger still in another week? Then the answer is real simple. You're not doing enough training volume. Then you're babying yourself on that side. Either way, if you can improve after your last week, either it's the relative effort, you're not going hard enough per set, or you're not doing enough sets. Either way, you have an answer. You shouldn't be able to do a better job next week, right? Then you know you're not pushing hard enough if you can get an improvement. How do you fix that? Deload, scrap, everything, relax, let the fatigue go away. In your next meso, you have some options. You were telling yourself, I'm starting 3 reps in reserve on your first week typically. what you thought was 3 reps in reserve, it probably was more like 4 or 5. An option you have if you fail the test and you actually improve performance in that last testing week is in the next meso, start closer to failure than you think. Say, well, my 3 RIR was clearly wrong, so I'm going to try going to 2 reps from failure, and that'll probably be what actually is 3 RIR. Try that. In addition, week to week to week, you could more aggressively add load or reps. You have a good session. You did 10 last week at 100 pounds. This time you're like, oh, I'll stop at 11. Even though you know you could have stopped at 15, no problem. So you used to adding just 1 rep or just 2.5 pounds, but clearly that's been resulting in your peak week being too easy. When you feel really good, say, okay, I'm actually going to add 5 pounds instead of 2.5, or I'll add 2 reps instead of 1. Be a little bit more aggressive in the additions week to week. So you either start harder or start just the same and progress harder, so that the end last week can be something that is a very serious attempt at training as hard as possible. Now, of course, option C is some combination of both. Start a little bit closer to failure, progress a little bit more aggressively. Remember, the goal is to start decent and progress until you burn up, until you can't do any more. And if you tested that week and you could do any more, some shit's got to change. You either got to start close to failure or you got to start progressing a little bit more aggressively. Just a little bit more, but something has to be done because you're not training hard enough. Now, that is assuming, remember this whole talk is assuming your volume is good enough. It could be you're training way too low volume. We have 50 other ways to solve that. So the volume should be solved. Even within its own right, if the volume is good, you may not be training hard enough if you can match that performance and beat it. This solution means that if you try this again, there's no way you're going to match your performance and beat it because you're starting closer to failure. You're progressing faster. So whatever you did instead of 405 for 12, and you're like, I did it for 13, no problem. This next time it's going to be 405 for 15. You're going to be so fatigued. You're going to do it for 10. And you're going to be like, okay, well, shit. I really did do a really good job last week, right? Now, this whole structure, this whole test is predicated on one flimsy little thing. And that is your ability to push in that one last final week, psychologically. That's tough. Luckily, it's not a test like we'll just train harder all the time because that requires you to change your psychology for every week. Luckily, it's just 1 week. So it can be a temporary change in mindset. But you may need some help getting you to that mindset of going ultra fucking hard. And that's the same mindset you should have in that test week, that 6th week or whatever, but it should also be the same one you should have in that last week. And maybe you don't have that mindset in that last week, and that's why that last week is too easy and you're actually not pushing as hard as you could. So how do you fix that? A couple of suggestions just off the top to get your head right to either train normally from now on, hard enough, or the kind of element of psychology you should be bringing into that last week. It works for both. Here it is. First, think about why you are in the gym. Do you demand success from your program? Because remember, most of us are in the gym. Yeah, it's fun, for sure. That's great. But most of us are in the gym and we care and we watch videos like this because we want results. So if you want results, you got to fucking wake up and do something about them. When you're pressing the last rep of your set in the chest press, how much do you want big pecs? Because if you really fucking want them, you're going to go, fuck this, I have another rep. And it happens. You're like, well, shit, here we go. And maybe another, and maybe another. But if you're like, my pecs are good enough, then you can rack anytime you want. And then I have nothing more to say to you as far as motivation, because clearly you are where you want to be. But it's a good idea before you head to the gym or when you're at the gym or before the set or even during the set to think, I want success. I demand success. And I'm going to do another rep to see if I can. Because if I can, then I haven't been training hard enough. If I can't, hey, shit, I've done everything I could. This whole thing is about doing everything you can. Nothing more, just what you can. Second suggestion, if you need a little bit more focus mentally to get the hard shit done. Think about it this way. Your situation, training hard enough, looking a certain way, we'll just end it there. The rest of your life, we're not going to fuck with. Do you train hard enough and do you look like what you want to look? There's an interesting realization you can make. You are the only person able to leverage anything to change that. Nobody's coming to save you. There's not going to be some kind of way for you to get more jacked without doing more work. There's not going to be some kind of way for you to alter your program or to actually train hard enough. It's all on you. You are the only force in the equation that can do something. So when you get into that chest press and you think, ooh, I'm going to go all the way, you are the only person that can do that. It has to be something you realize to take into your hands. No, I'm going to make this next rep happen, and I'm going to make this next rep happen. I'm the only one that can do it. There's no looking out to the side. You guys get close to failure, look this way, that way. There's nobody to look at. It's all on you. And if you can really meditate on that, you can be like, well, fuck, man. If I'm the only person that determines if I grow or not grow in a program, I'm at least going to fucking bring my best. And then you're on the right track. Next, this is real mindfuck. You can take pride in your ability of letting your ego go and reduce your aversion to pain or failure. A lot of the reason why people don't want to push that last rep is because it actually hurts. And if you think you're tough, then you might be tough enough to say, I don't care if it hurts. My ego is attached to the idea of not pain. I'm going to relax my ego and say, if pain happens, it's okay with me. Because you're not going to get hurt. It's just another rep. It's all the exercise is real safe in the gym. The worst thing that can really happen is two things. You can just experience the pain of muscles going close to failure. That sucks, but you can free your ego, at least for a short time, of having to worry about, I don't care about the pain. Meditate on that. When I come in, this set is about to start. You get into the leg press. You're ready to go. You think, fuck, there's a lot of pain coming. You can come to a realization in your own head, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. It's going to be pain, and I'm expecting it. So when it's pain, it's okay. And I know it hurts, and it's okay. And I'm going to do another rep, and I'm going to do another rep, because pain doesn't scare me, because I've expected it. If you can make that line of reasoning in your head, it can really help you. Another thing, I said two things, is the fear of failure. There's a bit of a psychological mindfuck to where you're coming up out of the hole with a squat or with a leg press or bench, and you just don't get the rep. So it's like easy to get into the gym and in such a way, and you always go 0 RIR close to fail, but you never quite fail because you don't want to experience that failure of literally not getting another rep. Well, this is not a big deal. There's a huge way in which nobody gives a shit. And there's a huge way in which you need to go to failure every now and again just to test to make sure you're training hard enough. You give a shit. So your ego is attached to not failing at things. It hurts the ego if you fail a lift. Your ego doesn't like this. It likes, oh, this, and I did it. Yay, rack, good enough. Remove your ego, and all the pain that comes in during those chest presses, it's your pain. You own it. We welcome that pain. And the failure, you don't care if you fail. You want to push as hard as fucking possible, and a failure results that doesn't somehow say you're a bad person, or that you weren't trying hard enough, or that you didn't accomplish something. Bodybuilding is real fucked like that. Failure is what we're looking for. Failure is success. That's weird, right? Abandon everything you know and just go. Good technique, of course. And then when failure happens, oh, it's just molecular. Like there's just not enough force being generated. Who gives a shit? You succeed in this case if you actually drive yourself to failure. And so few people can. Thinking about it this way, as taking your ego and going, I don't give a fuck if it hurts. I don't give a fuck if I fail. I'm just going to go. If you can bring that kind of intensity to that testing week, you have a good chance of beating your numbers and showing to yourself that you're actually a fucking pussy and you haven't been training hard enough. If you still, with all those weapons, don't beat that last week, well, shit, you really are training hard and there's no more you can give. At the end of the day, that's what we're testing is, do you have any more to give? And if the answer is no, hey, sweet, no big deal, right? Last little trick to make sure that last 6th testing week or whatever, I keep saying 6th, it depends on how long your meso is, but N+1 week, after your last week, your test week to see if you can push it further, remember this. Because you can go in there with all these things and be like, fuck yeah, but some of them are really scary. Like, man, I don't want to just be open to whatever pain comes. Fuck that. That's some Buddhist monk shit. That's a couple years down in training for me. Here's a slightly easier way to think about this. All you ever need is to beat those numbers by 2.5 pounds or 1 added rep. The test week doesn't say you have to go to all-out failure. The test week, it easily accomplishes telling you you've been training too easy if you can do any more. So when you come to that 6th week and you see it says 10 reps at 200 pounds, all you have to do is 11. That's not that hard. Just get 11. If you can't, turns out you were right. You do train hard enough. And if you can, then you're bullshit testing yourself well enough to realize, wow, I wasn't training hard enough. And I know that's an ego hit. And you have to admit to yourself, like, holy fuck, I was being a pussy. Here's some good news. 1, you get great gains training not so hard. Turns out you don't need to go all out to get great gains. So no big deal. You probably didn't miss much of anything. Here's another piece of good news. The fact that you found this out now means all of your training from now until infinity, when you can continue to train hard, is going to be more productive. You want to find this out early. It's like finding out you suck at like fighting in like elementary school, and your parents put you in jiu-jitsu and then you're a fucking stone cold killer the rest of your life, versus like having illusions about being a good fighter from just watching too many kung fu movies. And at age like 34, somebody knocks you the fuck out outside of a club and people are like, wow, you're a pussy. I had no idea. And you're like, shit, I didn't know either. It's better to find out early, and it's better to find out using yourself rather than somebody else, right? You have the control of the situation. So if you really think you're being, because a lot of times a bunch of the comments and everywhere else, people are like, man, I don't really know if I'm going hard enough. Now you have an objective test with which to do so. And the only subjective part of that test, because the outcomes are objective, the only subjective part is, can you willpower yourself for just one fucking week to push all out? And not even all out. I mean, even make it easier for you. Push just hard enough to get a little better than last week. If you can, easy. You can make your training harder and then everything will be better. And if you can't, and you actually pushed, but you still can't perform any better, well, shit, you've been doing things right the whole time. No big deal. If any of this is confusing, or if you need any more sort of motivation or insight or anything like that, drop a couple questions in the comments below. I'll try to answer them. Let's get after this shit. And if we're actually getting after it, we can focus on other things like technique, consistency, food, your sleep, and everything else. Because if you're training hard enough, everything else is an easy solution. If you're not training hard enough, that's the thing that has to be solved nice and early so that you can get to everything else. Get huge, get friends, get wealth. You're flying into jet, Russian models everywhere. Success. See you there.